Hi, and welcome to my third post. My name is Pam Glenn. I'm a certified nurse midwife, and I'm going to be talking to you about relationship abuse, one post at a time. Now, if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to check out my first post, which is more of an introduction, explains a bit about who I am and how I came to be doing this work. Please also check out my second post, which has more basic information. It describes the parameters about what this is, but also what this is not. I've also included hotline numbers that are going to be included in every video description for each of my posts. If you find that you're in a situation of relationship abuse, please, I encourage you, call the hotline number. There are advocates available 24/7 who can help you with your individual situation. So as I mentioned in my previous post, we're going to focus today about stereotypes that we might hold in our brains about relationship abuse. Now, we're human. Stereotypes can happen. They pop into our brains, sometimes without us even realizing it. But we're going to get at what stereotypes we might be holding in our brains about this situation. Now, the problem with stereotypes is like having the blinders on. And in the case of relationship abuse, it keeps us from seeing the reality that maybe somebody we love, somebody sitting right in front of us that we know may be in a situation of relationship abuse, but we don't see it because they don't fit the picture we hold in our brains about somebody who becomes a victim of abuse. So I'm going to do an exercise with you all. There's 3 parts to this exercise. And I'm going to say one word or one phrase. And I want you to think about what first pops into your brain when I say this word or phrase. You do not have to be politically correct with yourself. In fact, I want you to be really honest with yourself about what first pops up into your brain when I say this word or phrase. All right, so let's get started. I want you to take a deep breath, clear your brain. Tell me the first thing you think of when I say the word abuse. How many of you thought of something physical abuse, like pushing, shoving, getting beat up, getting thrown down the steps, getting thrown against a wall? Many of the participants of my talks often first think about physical abuse when I say the word abuse. Now, I cannot emphasize enough, emotional abuse is also abuse. Emotional abuse may be happening without any physical violence going on in the relationship. And again, I cannot emphasize enough that emotional abuse can be so very destructive and damaging to a person's life. I used to work 1 day a week with a job that I had. I used to go into a battered women's shelter to provide them with care and get them caught up on their health care. The women that I saw there often shared with me this phrase, and they said it to me very often. They said, you know what, Pam, the bruises on my arms will heal, the broken bones heal, but it's the scars on my heart from emotional abuse, the emotional abuse I endured from my partner that are just so challenging to heal. Now, I'm a firm believer that people can heal no matter what type of abuse they've come from, right? But I bring up that situation to emphasize again, emotional abuse can be so damaging and so destructive to people's lives, even if no other abuse is going on, no physical violence is happening. Now, as a new clinician, I used to ask my patients about this important health topic. And I used to ask it the wrong way. I even used the word abuse. I might even say something as simple as, hey, tell me about your relationship with your partner. Is it abusive? Right? Well, most of my patients, I now realize, they probably thought, you know what, I don't get beat up, I don't get pushed or shoved or pushed down the steps. Nope, I'm not in that relationship. That's not what's happening for me. But as a clinician, when I started to realize I can't use this word abuse because people often think of physical violence, I started to ask the question in a whole different way. I would ask about the emotional abuse behaviors that might be happening in their relationship. For example, are they getting isolated from family and friends? Does their partner support them continuing the other important relationships in their lives or the other activities that are important to them? Or are they getting isolated from their support systems, for example? When I started to ask questions that addressed more of the emotional abuse behaviors that might be happening in their relationship, that's when I started to have patients have their aha moments and disclose, this has been happening in my life. All right. So it's another reason why when I do these talks, I don't title them domestic violence and abuse. That implies physical violence, which again, may not be happening at all. That's why I call this relationship abuse. And as you all probably are very aware, there are all different types of abuse. I will be going through all the different types, just explaining them, defining them in a future post that's coming out soon. All right, so let's move on to part 2 of this exercise in getting to the stereotypes we might have in our brains about this situation. Again, take a deep breath, clear your brain. Tell me the first thing you think of, and you don't have to worry about being politically correct. Be honest with yourself. Who do you first picture when I say an abuser? Now, many participants in my presentations will say, well, I first pictured a man. That's very common. If that's the case for you, think about who is this man? What was he wearing? How did he handle himself? What did he look like? I used to go to high school health classes and talk to all the kids in the class there about dating abuse. And one day, I'm not sure what was happening, but every single class, I had 4 classes back to back talking about dating abuse. And when I asked the kids that day, tell me who comes to mind when I say an abuser, all 4 classes, their first reaction was to say, somebody really hairy, right? We get these ideas in our brains about who are in these situations, who are the abusers. And when I asked them, describe this guy further, they said, this is a hairy guy. He's maybe wearing a wife beater shirt. He's drinking a beer. He's smoking. That's who they pictured, right? But again, the problem with stereotypes is when we hold that picture in our brains, it keeps us from seeing that the person in front of us might be abusive or might be the victim. Let's take this male picture that we might get in our brains. Let's take it a step further. If you pictured a male, how many of you pictured a man, maybe he's very well known and respected in the community. Maybe he coaches the local soccer team, he gives to the local charities, he goes to church every Sunday, for example. How many of you pictured someone like that? How many of you pictured a woman who is an abuser? Because that may be the case. Now, people who abuse come from all different sexual orientation backgrounds, all different educational backgrounds, all different socioeconomic and religious backgrounds, all cultures, races, and ethnicities, all different backgrounds. All right, let's do the third part of this exercise. Take a deep breath again, clear your brain. Tell me, who do you picture when I say a victim of abuse? Many participants during my presentations often first picture a female, right? Some picture children, some do picture a male, which that may be the case as well. But many of them first picture a female. And when I ask, tell me more about this female that you picture, they often picture and describe this woman as frail, weak, scared, maybe cowering, small, tiny, right? So I learned a very important lesson one day. I was working in one of my clinics, and I work in a whole different variety of clinic settings, from some of the poorer community clinics in inner city to a clinic that I was working in that day, which was in a more affluent area. Anyways, that day I was running behind on my schedule. It was a super busy day. I don't like to run behind, but sometimes it happens. My patients need that extra time, and that's all okay. But I had a lady come in for her annual exam. I was running behind, and all I can do is describe to you that she was picture perfect, right? She was the head of her own company, wearing a perfect power suit, perfect hair, perfect makeup. You would describe her as extremely self-confident, intelligent. She really had her act together, so to speak, right? And just for a split second, I thought to myself, maybe I won't ask her my questions about relationship abuse because she doesn't look like somebody who's in that situation. But guess what? I asked anyways. And I found out and discovered with her that despite all the success in her life, despite her being so self-confident and well-educated, she had an extremely abusive relationship going on with her partner at the time. I learned in that moment, I need to ask about this issue with all of my patients. I can't look at somebody and determine if they're in a situation of relationship abuse or not. Again, people who are in this situation come from all different backgrounds. All right. So I encourage you to take some time, take a moment or two, and think about what stereotypes have you held in your brain about abuse, about abusers, about victims and survivors of abuse. Name those stereotypes that you may have held in your brain, identify them, and then release them, right? Because we want to get them out of our brain and realize that there's all different types of abuse, and people who abuse, as well as people who end up as victims of relationship abuse, come from all different backgrounds. All right. So my next post is going to focus on a definition of abuse. We're also going to delve into what is the underlying issue that lead abusers to do these behaviors. It's very complex. I am not going to pretend to have all the answers on that one, but I am going to give you some guidelines in understanding why people abuse. All right. So I'm going to end with one more thing. Please share this YouTube channel link with anyone you know, friends, family, people you work with, because you just never know that the information presented here may end up positively and significantly impacting someone's life, someone who you maybe have no idea is in that situation, but they hear this information and they realize this is happening in their lives. All right, thanks so much for all your time today. Appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you on my next post, focused again on a definition of abuse, as well as a basic underlying reason of why we see abusive behaviors in many situations. All right, take care, stay safe, and thank you again. Bye-bye.